Imagine turning on your computer one morning and realizing that the rules you've lived with for decades no longer apply. The blue screens, forced updates, license keys, background telemetry, and you don't really own this machine suddenly feel ancient. Not because Windows disappeared overnight, but because Linux quietly crossed a line that many people thought it never would. This change didn't arrive with fireworks or a dramatic press conference. It slipped in through usability, polish, and power, and now that it's here, Windows suddenly looks like a relic of a different era. For a long time, the common narrative was simple. Windows was for normal people, Linux was for nerds. Windows was easy, Linux was powerful, but complicated. Windows was polished, Linux was fragmented. That story survived for years, mostly because it had enough truth to keep repeating. But recently, something fundamental shifted. Linux didn't just catch up in one area, it unified several things at once: usability, performance, security, and user control. And the result is not just Linux is better now, but Windows is starting to feel unnecessary. The change starts with how Linux treats the user. On Windows, you are not the owner of your system in the truest sense. You are a licensed user. The operating system decides when to update, what features to install, what services to run in the background, and what data gets collected. You can fight it, delay it, tweak registry keys, install third-party tools, but the default relationship is clear. Microsoft is in charge. Linux flipped that relationship completely, and the recent change is that you no longer need technical expertise to benefit from that freedom. Modern Linux distributions now install faster than Windows, boot faster than Windows, and run smoother on the same hardware. This isn't marketing hype. It's the result of years of optimization, lightweight desktop environments, and a kernel that scales beautifully from low-end laptops to enterprise servers. What changed recently is that this performance advantage no longer comes with a usability penalty. You don't need to memorize terminal commands to enjoy it. You can, but you don't have to. When you install a modern Linux system today, you're greeted with a clean, intuitive interface that feels instantly familiar. The taskbar works like you expect. The settings are logically organized. Applications install with a single click. Updates happen quietly in the background, without interrupting your work or forcing reboots at inconvenient times. Compare that to Windows updates, which can hijack your workflow, reboot your system, and still fail halfway through, leaving you staring at a working on update screen like it's 2009 again. This is where the real shift happens. Linux updates are now boring, and that's a compliment. They just work. You can update the entire system, including the operating system and all installed applications, from one place. No more individual updaters running in the background. No more Bayesian mismatches. No more mystery processes eating CPU. Windows still struggles with this, relying on a mix of Windows Update, Microsoft Store updates, standalone installers, and third-party auto-updaters. Linux solved this problem decisively. Another massive change is application availability. For years, the biggest argument against Linux was software compatibility. But my apps don't run on Linux. That argument is collapsing fast. Web applications now dominate productivity, and they run identically on Linux. Creative tools have Linux versions or powerful alternatives. Development tools are often better on Linux. And thanks to compatibility layers and containerization, even many Windows-only applications now run seamlessly. Gaming was once the final frontier, the one place where Windows still held an unquestioned advantage. That advantage is shrinking rapidly. Modern Linux gaming performance is often on par with Windows, sometimes even better. Hardware support has improved dramatically. Drivers are stable and frequently updated. Game launchers, anti-cheat systems, and major engines now support Linux in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. The idea that Linux is not for gaming feels outdated, like saying the internet is just for email. But the most important change isn't speed, or updates, or software compatibility. It's trust. Linux does not spy on you. It doesn't collect telemetry by default. It doesn't show ads in the operating system. It doesn't try to upsell you cloud services every time you open the settings menu. Windows does all of that, and increasingly so. What once felt like minor annoyances have become structural features of the platform. On Linux, the operating system exists to serve you. On Windows, you increasingly feel like you exist to serve the operating system's ecosystem. That difference becomes impossible to ignore once you experience it. Linux lets you decide what runs on your machine. You can remove components you don't need. You can customize everything from the boot process to the desktop appearance. And thanks to modern tools, you can do all of this without breaking the system or diving into cryptic configuration files. Security is another area where the gap is widening. Linux's permission model, open source transparency, and rapid patching cycle make it inherently resilient. Vulnerabilities are discovered and fixed in the open. You're not waiting for a monthly patch day or hoping that a closed source fix doesn't introduce new problems. The community audits the code constantly. This isn't theoretical security, it's practical, real-world robustness that shows up in fewer malware infections, fewer system slowdowns, and fewer catastrophic failures. Windows relies heavily on antivirus software to compensate for architectural weaknesses. Linux doesn't need that crutch. Malware exists, of course, but the ecosystem makes large-scale infections far more difficult. And because updates are fast and centralized, critical fixes reach users quickly. This is one of those quiet advantages that you only appreciate when something goes wrong on another system and nothing goes wrong on yours. Then there's the issue of hardware lifespan. Windows has a habit of abandoning older machines, either through official requirements or through performance degradation. Perfectly capable hardware gets labeled unsupported or becomes sluggish after major updates. Linux does the opposite. It breathes new life into older systems. Laptops that struggle to run modern Windows versions suddenly feel fast and responsive. This matters not just for cost savings, but for sustainability. Linux turns e-waste into usable machines again. The recent change that really drives this home is how polished Linux distributions have become for everyday users. You can install Linux today and never touch the terminal. You can browse, work, create, play games, and manage files with a graphical interface that feels cohesive and modern. This wasn't always true. Linux desktops used to feel like experiments. Now they feel like products. Meanwhile, Windows feels increasingly bloated. More background services, more ads, more integrations you didn't ask for. More AI features forced into the interface, whether you want them or not. The operating system feels heavier with every release, while Linux feels lighter and more focused. That contrast is stark. Another subtle but powerful shift is control over updates. On Linux, you choose when and how to update. You're not treated like a child who can't be trusted to make decisions. On Windows, updates can be delayed but rarely avoided. Feature updates arrive, whether you're ready or not. Driver updates can break things. System changes happen without meaningful consent. Over time, that erodes trust. Linux also benefits from a culture that values user choice. If you don't like one desktop environment, you can switch to another. If you don't like one distribution, you can migrate to another without relearning everything. You are not locked into a single vendor's vision. Windows users don't have that option. You either accept Microsoft's direction, or you leave the platform entirely. This flexibility extends to development and innovation. Linux evolves faster because anyone can contribute. Bugs are fixed by people who actually use the system daily. Features are added because users want them, not because they drive engagement metrics. This leads to software that feels honest. It does what it says it does, nothing more, nothing less. The change also affects how professionals view their tools. Developers, engineers, data scientists, and system administrators have always leaned toward Linux. Now that same preference is spreading to writers, designers, students, and everyday users. Once people realize they can get the same or better experience without ads, forced updates, or licensing headaches, the question becomes obvious: why stay? Windows still has strengths. Enterprise integration, legacy software support, and sheer market inertia keep it relevant. But relevance is not the same as leadership. The momentum has shifted. Linux is no longer the alternative. It's becoming the default for people who care about performance, privacy, and control. What makes Windows look obsolete isn't that it's stopped working. It's that its design philosophy feels outdated. It assumes users should be managed rather than empowered. It treats the operating system as a platform for services rather than a tool. Linux treats the operating system as a foundation you build on, not a billboard you tolerate. Once you experience a system that respects your time, your hardware, And your choices, going back feels uncomfortable. The pop-ups feel louder. The restrictions feel tighter. The compromises feel unnecessary. That's the real shift. Linux didn't just improve, it redefined expectations. This is why this Linux change matters so much. It's not a single feature. It's the convergence of usability, performance, security, and trust into something that feels complete. Windows isn't obsolete because Linux copied it. Windows looks obsolete because Linux moved past it. And the most remarkable part is that this happened quietly. No dramatic announcement, no forced migration. Just steady progress until one day you realize that the excuses are gone. Linux is ready, and Windows suddenly feels like it's still catching up. That's not a future prediction. That's the present.